Stuart Ross is a writer, editor, writing teacher, publisher, and small press activist. He published his first poetry chapbook on the photocopier in his dad's office in 1979 and never looked back. Stuart was the recipient of the 2019 Harbourfront Festival Prize for his contributions to Canadian literature, as well as the 2010 Relit Prize for Short Fiction, the 2012 Mona Elaine Adelman Award for Jewish Fiction, the 2016 Kitty Lewis, Hazel Miller, Dennis Turbin Poetry Prize, and the 2017 Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Poetry. His 20 books of fiction, poetry, and essays include Motel of the Opposable Thumbs, A Sparrow Came Down Resplendent, Snowball, Dragonfly, Jew, Buying Cigarettes for the Dog, and Confessions of a Small Press Racketeer. His latest book is 70 Kippers, a collection of poems written in collaboration with Ottawa poet Michael Dennis. In spring 2022, ECW Press will be publishing his first book-length essay. Stuart has taught writing workshops across the country. He was the 2010 Writer in Residence at Queen's University and is the Winter 2021 Writer in Residence at the University of Ottawa. And his poetry has been translated into French, New Norse, Slovene, Russian, Spanish, and Estonian. Stuart lives in Cobourg, Ontario, and is currently working on 10 different book manuscripts.
So this is a poem about a neighborhood called Bathurst Manor, where I grew up in Toronto in the 1960s, 70s. It's called De Havilland. I have walked a mile south, and I have bought a kosher egg roll at a store called Regina's, and I bought it from Regina, and I have walked a few doors west. This is Wilmington and Shepherd, where I once got called a dirty Jew. I enter another store, and it is not Pinky's Chinese food, and it is not Paradise Pizza. I am eating my egg roll. Plus, did I mention I bought a potato latka? I am eating that too. I am in De Havilland bookstore, and the smell of moldy books fills my nostrils, and I smell Charlie Brown books and Hardy Boys books, and I smell a book from the TV show Rat Patrol, and I smell a book by Ogden Nash. It smells like poetry. The prices are scribbled across the covers in black grease pencil, 45 cents, 75 cents, 15 cents. And the books are stacked all around me. Everywhere I look, there are paperbacks. I buy a Mad Book and Rat Patrol. And the old man takes my dollar, and his wife comes out from the back room and gives me a tired smile and asks me if I found some good ones today. I hand her the books, and she nods at the covers, and she puts the books in a paper bag, and my fingers are greasy from the latka, and I step out onto the sidewalk. South of Shepherd are the Christians, and back north are the Jews, and I walk north until I get to Searle, and I go knock on Murray Nightingale's door. Everyone who lives in Murray's house has red hair, but no one answers the door. And on Brighton is Eric Cohen, and on Acton is Mark Wolfstadt, and on Combe is Randy Sinyakov, and Sheldon Teicher is somewhere, and Hetty Cohen, and Debbie Burke, and Alan Wolfe too. And I head straight home past the Beth Emeth Synagogue, where I will someday have my bar mitzvah, and Rabbi Kelman has red hair too. And there is Wilmington Park, and there is Wilmington Public School, and there is Bathurst Manor Plaza, where my mother will kill a neo-Nazi in a novel I write 40 years later. And soon I am at 179 Pannyhill Road, up in my room, on my back, on my bed, and I spill the books out of the paper bag right onto the chest. And the truth is, I will never read the Rat Patrol book, but I read the Mad, and next week I'll go back for the Ogden Nash. The smell of fried macaroni and cheese wafts up from the kitchen. I won't eat it unless it's fried. My grandfather is 2 floors down at his Singer sewing machine. His foot pumps the cast iron treadle. His veins are made of thread. And this is one more poem from this book, which is, by the way, my attempt at writing like a really commercial, like best-selling poetry book, which of course is impossible. A Sparrow Came Down Resplendent. I was so disgusted when I released this attempt at mainstream poetry that I stood out front of my own launch and protested it and boycotted it. Anyway, this is a poem called, I don't know if some of you might recognize the name Oscar Williams, but if you don't, back in the, I think, 40s, 50s, 60s, every poetry anthology was edited by this guy, Oscar Williams. So It's called And Oscar Williams Walks In. I'm sitting in my bedroom listening to Linda Ronstadt's Heart Like a Wheel, and then Leo Sayers' Just a Boy, and after that, Randy Newman's Sail Away, for which I read the lyrics on the record sleeve while it plays, every word, even though I've listened to it about 100 times before, and my mother's in the kitchen burning steaks and making mashed potatoes, and she yells up, "Stuart, your friend is here," and Oscar Williams, as I later find out his name is, walks in wearing a bow tie and John Lennon glasses and says, "I see you like reading." And it's not because I'm reading the lyrics to Simon Smith and the Amazing Dancing Bear at that moment, because I follow his eyes. One wall of my room is covered in bookshelves. I find him pretty creepy, even though I have lots of friends who are older than me, mostly because of this poetry workshop led by a guy named George Miller I go to every Saturday with Mark Laba, where everyone is older than us. "Have you ever read this?" asks Oscar Williams, and he holds out a moldy copy of Immortal Poems of the English Language. "I saw you have a mother down there. My mother was named Hannah Rappaport, and my father was named Musha Kaplan. I am Williams in the same way you are Ross. Have you ever read this?" Oscar Williams asks, and he holds out a dog-eared copy of the New Pocket Anthology of American Verse from Colonial Days to the Present. They're pretty good, you know. They have poems by people like Ezra Pound and Robert Frost and Edna St. Vincent Millay and William Carlos Williams and Oscar Williams, of course. Do you want to go hang out at the cigar store? The album cover for Sail Away has a big picture of Randy Newman's face, and I hold it up over my own face so it looks like I am actually Randy Newman. "Pardon me," says Oscar Williams, "I thought you were Stuart Ross, teenage author of such immortal poems as Jesus Tobacco and Ritual of the Concrete Penguins. I died in 1964, so sometimes I get a bit confused." And then he is gone, like it was a dream. I go downstairs where my mother is opening a can of peas and say, "Why did you let that guy in, Mom?" And she says, "What guy? All that rock music you play is giving me a headache and you hallucinations. Go wash your hands. We're having dinner soon." It is 1974. In 42 years, I will include this poem in a book called A Sparrow Came Down Resplendent. Barry and Owen sit down at the table, and me and Mom and Dad, we take turns trying to pronounce Worcestershire. So that's a little bit of my life in a little Jewish suburb north end of Toronto called Bathurst Manor. I'm just going to read a couple of poems from this book here, 70 Kippers. My friend and I, Michael Dennis, fine Ottawa poet, we wrote about 120 collaborative poems, and we went through them, and there were 70 kippers, 70 kippers. Anyway, Michael was a very, very dear friend, and he died on the last day of 2020. And we got this book out a few months earlier so he could hold it and see it and know that we had this book together. So I'm going to read the first and last poem. They're pretty crazy poems. They're really weird poems. One. The crater in his lawn just kept growing and growing. He tried reason and bribery as it swallowed the front porch, his dog cauliflower, and Jimmy ate from next door. The police sat watching from lawn chairs, ordered pizza, had it delivered, but the ground swallowed them and their wives and husbands and manual typewriters. An hour later, the crater burped, spit back Jimmy, who was now 43 and married, the dead dog's skeleton crackling in his leashed collar. The end of days unfolded before him like reverse origami. And one more collaborative poem with dear Michael Dennis. It's the 70th Kipper in the book. So now you have to buy it because you've heard the beginning and the end. Someone was always on the wrong end of this call that came while the ducks were sleeping in the cattle load and cattle comfort. The TV was skipping and the toaster smoking. Bob knew another day was starting bad. He wished he'd remembered to sleep. Night was just dark he was awake for. The arrival of his usual nightmares pockmarked his sleep like blisters across his bloodshot eyes. He looked across the pillows to a sleeping Bobby Joe, then swung his feet to the hardwood floor. That phone wouldn't stop ringing by itself. So a couple of poems by myself and by me and Michael Dennis. And I'm going to read a poem now. I'm going to read a few unpublished poems. This one is called Willow Street, and it is for, after, and with Nelson Ball. And I'll mention Nelson Ball was perhaps one of the finest poets in Canada, certainly the greatest minimalist and nature poet. He was a very, very close friend of mine. He died 2 summers ago. And in fact, right behind me is a painting by Barbara Crusoe, who was Nelson's partner in life for about 45 years. So this is what a typical visit with Nelson would be like. Willow Street. Nelson and I sit facing each other in silence. I get up, put a kettle on the 2-burner stove, sit back down, resume our silence. The kettle rattles. I pour myself a tea, sit back down, resume our silence. We cover a lot of ground. So I highly recommend that everyone go out and read all the Nelson Ball you can, buy all the Nelson Ball you can. My name is Ross, but my Russian grandfather's name was Rozovsky, and I wish I'd stuck with the name Rozovsky, but my grandparents changed it when they came to Canada to make life a little easier. But I invented this character named Rozovsky, and I've been writing poems about this character for about 20-something years. And this is the most recent one. It's got a lot of Hollywood references you may or may not recognize, but it's called Rozovsky in Paradise. In the dark, Rozovsky settles into his seat. Around him, whispers, the crumpling of wrappers, the scraping of feet. Music shakes the floor and the screen explodes in a burst of lightning. Burt Lancaster, wearing only swimming trunks, presses his sinewy body against a door as rain pounds the terrible suburbs. He wraps his arms around his naked chest and sobs. Rozovsky didn't sleep so well last night. He rubs his eyes, then watches as Deborah Kerr walks slowly along a long hallway illuminated only by the spluttering candle she holds before her. Her lips tremble as she braces for the cries of ghosts of children possessed by the devil. Rozovsky sinks further into his seat and pats his shirt pocket for cigarettes. Nothing. Terence Stamp stands over the motionless body of Samantha Egger, his dark eyes empty of emotion. He thought she'd come to love him. Outside the theater on the sidewalk, Rozovsky has forgotten it's still afternoon. The sun pries open his squinting eyes with a shoehorn his grandfather brought from Russia. Elizabeth Taylor comes to visit Montgomery Clift in his tiny jail cell. She says she will always love him, and he marches off to the chair. Rozovsky pushes through the door of a cigar store, buys a Coke and cigarettes from a guy wearing a yarmulke. It's someone's yahrzeit tonight, but Rozovsky can't remember whose. He buys a candle. He'll remember later. He pops open the Coke cap on a newspaper box, takes a big gulp, and lights a Rothman's. Kim Novak stands in front of the painting of Carlotta Valdez. She's just left some flowers on the dead woman's grave, and now she's come to the gallery to gaze at her portrait. Rozovsky looks at the yahrzeit candle in his hand. The soundtrack swells and the candle turns into a ship. It's dark in the hold, just a few dim light bulbs swing gently, and Rozovsky strains to see all the faces, tired, pale, and washed, and he hears whispers, quiet laughter, soft weeping. Soon he opens his eyes. A child whips by him on a bike. Playing cards slapping the spokes. Someone waves from a station wagon. A weeping willow sings like Enrico Caruso. A doorknob appears in Rozovsky's hand. He turns it. And one more very tiny recent poem, new poem called Poem. It's called imaginatively titled Poem. I see a light at the end of the tunnel. and beyond that, a tunnel. So I think I have time to read a few more poems. I think I've got about 6 minutes or something. So I'm going to read from my most recent solo poetry book, which is stupidly called Motel of the Opposable Thumbs. It's from Anvil Press in Vancouver. I think it's my 5th or 6th book with them. And what do I read? I'm going to read a few things here. I'm going to start off with this poem called Expired Borscht. And I wrote that when I was on one of my many trips to the West Kootenays. And this one is dedicated to a few West Kootenay friends, Terry Taylor, Linda Crossfield, and Ted Crossfield. Borscht is circular when viewed from above. Both hot borscht and cold are in fashion. Also, there is a wedding recipe and a funeral one. The sticker says before May 21st, but it's May 22nd. There are 40,000 Doukhobors in Canada. Each one is shaped differently. Doukhobor means snowflake in Ukrainian. If you eat expired borscht, several untoward things occur. I will list them in my next book. Part of a Doukhobor village has been preserved in Grand Forks, British Columbia. Doukhobor does not mean snowflake in Ukrainian. In 1944, 7 Doukhobors went on a hunger strike near Nelson, BC. Depending on how expired the borscht is, you might need the funeral version. And let's see what we got here. I'll read this depressing one now so I don't read it at the end and leave you all depressed. I'll end with a slightly less depressing one later on. It's called Whatever You Desire. It's a prose poem. Look at the tree burst from the top of my skull, so recently mown as my friends disappear. Look at my car losing control and sliding off the road into the snowy ravine as my friends disappear. Look at the drunken sky pressing its ugly belly into the fragile mountains about to collapse as my friends disappear. Look at the fine zigzag cracks forming at my ankles and spreading toward my groin as my friends disappear. Look at Saul Bass's credits for Vertigo as my friends disappear. Look at the rabbits cowering in the closet of the motor vehicle registration office as outside the air becomes filled with balloons as my friends disappear. Look at the blood leaking from this plate of vegetables as my friends disappear. Look at my father phoning me once again from the dead. He forgot to mention that he buried all the Monopoly pieces in a Seagram's bag in the backyard on Pannyhill Road as my friends disappear. Look at my friends, the back of their heads, their brains pushing out of their ears again, their legs moving like mechanical stilts, their words spilling from their mouths like blinking neon lights as my friends disappear. Look at the remains of the soldier I pretended to kill in the staircase of my high school in 1974. Look at the door lying in the center of the lawn and imagine what would happen if you opened it. Look at my grandmother's Russian accent. Look how she fries up the chicken fat. Look at her putting my grandfather's dinner on the tray in front of him as my friends disappear. Look at the crane in the distance. Smell the gasoline as you stand in front of your brother's grave. Look at the frightened boll weevil. Look at the cartoon penguin on TV as mother lies in a coma as my friends disappear. Look at the clock. Look at the tangled hair in the comb. Look at the oil the car left on the road and how it glistens and takes on the shape of whatever you desire. And I think I've got time for one more poem. So I'm going to read one more poem. Actually, here, I'm gonna read one quick poem by memory. It's from an older book of mine called A Hamburger in a Gallery. It's only one word, so it won't take up too much time. It took me 4 seconds to write it. Glad. Okay, now I'm gonna read a longer poem, not a longer poem than that one, and this is the last poem I'll read. And I want to thank you all so much. The Poets Corner gang has been amazing to work with. and it was such a pleasure to hear Medri and to meet Medri through this reading here, and again to see so many people I know and I don't know. This is called The Food Court, and we're going back to Bathurst Manor in Toronto, 1960s, 1970s. Yorkdale Mall was, I think, the first shopping mall in Canada, and that's where this probably takes place. You could get anything down there in the food court: egg rolls and chicken balls, spaghetti, banquet burgers, pizza with pepperoni, tuna sandwiches, souvlaki. It was like you had the whole world at your fingertips, my dad used to say. You could travel from continent to continent without ever getting on a plane. So Murray and Ken went down the escalator first because I was moving slower since my arms were full. I was still near the top when they reached the bottom, and I saw them step out onto the food court and look around, their eyes wide. On the escalator, which was moving stairs, you could just stand there, not moving your feet, and then you would be downstairs. But I guess the problem was I was a bit impatient, eager to catch up to Murray and Ken, and I took a few steps down and stumbled a bit, and I dropped everything. I watched it all bounce down the moving stairs of the escalator: my book bag, my records, and my dad's wooden coffin. Murray and Ken heard the racket and saw all that stuff coming down and me regaining my balance and running after it. The people on the up escalator stared at me as they went past. When I caught up, Murray and Ken each had one end of my dad's coffin. They flipped it. It had landed upside down. I always drop that, I told them. Murray put my records and my book bag on top of the pine box, and we wandered from one food booth to the next. Ken got a tuna sandwich. Murray got souvlaki. And I got spaghetti, which was also my dad's favorite, which was probably why I got it. I showed them my records while we ate, and Murray grabbed the Linda Ronstadt one from my hands and looked at the cover, where she was sitting on a bale of hay with her guitar and wearing a bonnet. "She's so beautiful," Murray said. "I hope I get a girl like that." Thanks very much.
Sheila Nefertiti asked if you remember Michael Grotsky from that Jewish enclave up Bathurst.
I don't, but I'm pretty sure I remember Sheila from a long, long time ago in Toronto. I don't remember Michael Grotsky though, no.
Young Street. I was a teenager. Yeah, and books and Mark Laba, Crad Kolodny.
Yeah. I'm catching up with your notes here now. Okay.
Angus is asking, he's wondering why food shows up so much in your poetry.
Wow, that's really interesting. And I hadn't really noticed that, to be honest, but I'm a little food obsessed maybe, so there is that. I actually, the new book that I have coming out in the new, oh, a lovely note from Liz Ball, Nelson Ball's sister here is here. Wow. I'm sorry, distracted by that. Thank you so much, Liz. Wow, a lovely note. Oh yeah, so I have a book coming out in the next year, and I haven't mentioned to anyone ever publicly what it is yet, but it is called The Book of Grief and Hamburgers. And it's a book about grief. But many, many years ago, a friend of mine at the time, Kevin Conley, a very fine poet, said, every time you get near anything heavy in your poetry, you get towards something really serious and heavy, you throw in a hamburger to make people laugh. And so I was thought, am I a person who avoids grieving? Am I a person who doesn't know how to grieve? Is it because I keep throwing in hamburgers? And so it's the Book of Grief and Hamburgers. I don't think that exactly answers the question, but it might be related in some way.
Yeah. What draws you to surrealist poetry? Have you always written that kind of poetry?
Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I think so. I've always been interested in surrealist visual art. Like when I was a kid and I saw Salvador Dali's and Rene Magritte's paintings, I was completely blown away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And I stumbled upon some French poets, some French surrealists. And also David McFadden, who's a Canadian, sometimes surrealist poet from Hamilton. Ron Padgett, a sometimes surrealist from New York. And that is the stuff that really excited me. It's possibly because I sleep so poorly. I'm always in a half dream state. And so I'm very open to dreamlike imagery. And that's how my brain works anyways.